Hi, and welcome back to a new video. So in this video, it's going to be a lot different than other videos that I typically do on this channel, which is mostly just me lifting. But one thing that I've been trying to get better at in general since I have really gotten out of college, frankly, is to just read more and spend more time reading. I have the advantage as a teacher of having the whole summer to read, so I don't really have a good excuse to not be a consistent reader, and I have been pretty good at reading a good amount this calendar year, and I kind of want to continue that momentum. And I think one thing that could help is talking about the books that I read after I finish them, because then if I don't have a review for a very long time, people can call me out for not finishing a book. But the book that I just finished is called All My Friends Are Going to Be Strangers by Larry McMurtry, which is how I believe you say his name. But this book was written in the 70s and it was set in the 1960s. So as far as a book I would choose to read, I kind of like books that are set in older times. So I enjoyed that kind of aesthetic of it. The three main categories that I'm going to be looking at when I am developing my overall rating, I'll give a rating out of 10 at the end. But the three main categories are readability, the story and the plot, and the general enjoyment. And they kind of intertwined because I didn't really want to do a rating for each of the three categories and then give a rating. That was my original thought, but I thought that'd be a little bit too difficult when really I just want to give an overall rating in general. So as far as the readability, it's an easy book to read. You're not going to struggle to get through it or to follow the plot or follow the story. There are some weird jumps in the plot and in the story. If you don't know what this book is about, essentially the writer Danny gets a book published at the beginning and then goes on different adventures around Texas and California with the book and with different women and stuff like that, and then gets really depressed at the end. So I know it's a really quick rundown of the plot, but following along with it is not really that difficult. The author does a good job of painting a picture with the characters, so you're able to generally remember the characters. They all kind of have their own personalities. There were a couple that were just kind of randomly thrown in that didn't really make sense to even have exist, but you could at least understand them, and the author did a good job of describing them in a way where you can imagine them. So the readability was really good, so the author did a good job with that part. As far as the general story and the plot, there were weird jumps in the plot from where he met his first gal, Sally, and then suddenly they're married, and just like random things like that would happen to where it didn't really make any sense. And some of the characters that I mentioned, not really major characters, but pretty minor characters, were just kind of randomly thrown in and given like an elaborate backstory, but didn't really have any impact on the plot or anything. So that to me was kind of odd. I didn't really enjoy that part as much. And really the main character, and I don't know if this was the goal of the story, but the main character, Danny, I didn't really like. I wasn't rooting for him. At least for me, I didn't want good things to happen to him because he was just a pretty immoral person, sleeping around with these different women, eating like crap, pretending like he's in love with all these different people, and just generally being a bad person, making poor choices when it comes to his love life and just general life choices. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know if that was the goal of the author to make it someone that was complicated in that regard, but like, I never wanted him to be successful. So at the end, he's going through I believe the river, the Rio Grande, I think that's what it is, or some river that's connected to Mexico, and he's wading through it. And I actually looked up and he does survive that because there is a sequel to this book, which I most likely won't be reading. But with his choice there at the end to kind of wade through the river, and, I won't spoil the entire ending, but I was kind of hoping that he would just drown and go away because he just wasn't really a good person. And I think the way that the author had wrote him into the book was to try to get you to be empathetic towards him in some sort of way. And I really wasn't. Like, I didn't like him as a person. But that could have also been the goal of the author, to make someone that was complicated in that regard. So if that was the goal, then I think that was a really successful, and that would actually make it a better book. If that wasn't the goal, if you're supposed to be empathetic or feel sympathy for this person, then obviously not a good, not successfully done as far as that goes. As far as the general enjoyment of the book, I will say I did not struggle. So enjoyment is obviously very subjective. And if I were to really not enjoy a book, so I read a couple of philosophy books earlier this year, and those ones I really didn't enjoy because they're really boring. I do say with this one that it was enjoyable in the aspect that I wanted to keep reading it and I didn't struggle. I think after the first 2 chapters, I was like, I don't like this guy. I don't want to read it. But I was like, I'll just keep going because I want to finish. I want to be a reader. I want to be reading books consistently. So I'll get through the book. And then once I got into the midst of it, then it was a lot easier to be consistently reading with that. And that's kind of how I assess the enjoyment of a book is, do I want to pick it up and start reading again? Is it hard to put down? Not necessarily am I enjoying the story of it. Like I said, I didn't like the main character and I was hoping bad things would happen to him. I didn't feel any empathy or sympathy for him, but I was able to keep reading the book. I wanted to pick it up and I wanted to finish it and I did finish it. So that certainly will get high marks in that. Now, as far as my general rating, it's kind of combining all those factors. So for me, if I were to hand this book to someone, would I want them to read it or would I recommend them to read it? I'd probably say no, because I really didn't like the main character of it. Now, I'm not opposed to reading other books by this author because it does seem like he is a good writer, so it's not putting me off from this author entirely. But as far as this book goes, I wouldn't recommend it to others, so I would probably give it about a 5 out of 10. The only reason I wouldn't go lower is because it was very, the readability was good, the plot you can understand, and it was a book that I was able to, read the whole thing. I wanted to keep picking it up. For me to go like a 6, 7, or 8, I would have had to feel something different about the main author or the protagonist of the book potentially, or just like the plot a little bit more. It did kind of jump a couple different times that I didn't really enjoy, but it isn't a bad book. And that's why originally I was like, I'm going to give it a really low score, but I didn't want to give it that low of a score because I don't think it earned that low of a score. So I think a 5 out of 10 is pretty fair. It's a pretty average book as far as from other books that I've read in my life. Potentially these ratings might get a little bit different as I go, but I'm also not trying to overthink the rating that I give it and hold it too much against it. It's a book, I would say that if you like books that are set in the 1960s, I would give it a little bit more of a rating and recommend it in that regard. But I don't know. It depends on what you're trying to get out of a book. If you're trying to read a book where you are rooting for the protagonist, you want good things to happen, and you're going through it, then this is not the book for you. But if you don't mind not liking the protagonist and kind of wanting him to not be successful, then you could enjoy it. So I don't know. That's where it's I'm kind of split with how I feel about the book, and that's why I think the 5 out of 10 is a pretty fair rating for what that is. But I'm not sure what the next book is that I'm going to read. I've been considering the sequel to Watership Down, which if you don't know what that book is, I would highly recommend reading Watership Down. But I have to kind of flip through the couple. I have 10 different books that I have sitting around and look through them to see which one that I want to read. But I have been trying to read some philosophy books. I haven't really been enjoying those, so I'll probably stick to novels just so I can have something that I can actually get through and not just be bored out of my mind. So I will give that book credit. I wasn't bored while I was reading it. I just didn't want the protagonist to have any success. But so a different kind of video, like I said, but these will probably be pretty infrequent. Just depends on how fast I read. So let me know what you think, if you've read this book or if you know of this author. Maybe I'm being too harsh or maybe I'm delusional, which is always a possibility. But in any which case, I hope you enjoyed this little bit of a different video, and I'll talk to you all in the next one. Peace.